The suburban enclave of Maplewood Glade appeared tranquil to any outsider. Wide sidewalks lined streets, framed by manicured lawns, while neat rows of modest single-story homes interspersed with larger two-story properties. Occasional flower beds bloomed with seasonal colors, and each driveway displayed the standard-issue metal mailbox, a regulated design chosen by the local homeowners association. At first glance, everything seemed serene and stable. Yet under the calm veneer lay the busy undercurrent of the HOA, an entity designed to enforce uniformity in Maplewood Glade. While some communities use their HOA for routine maintenance, Maplewood Glade's HOA had acquired a reputation for micromanagement, and one person, in particular, stood at the heart of every petty controversy. Marilyn Farnett, a woman in her late 40s whom neighbors privately, and not so privately, referred to as Karen. Marilyn had reigned as the self-styled enforcer of the HOA for half a decade. She was known for delivering petty fines when a flowerbed color didn't match the approved palette or when a holiday decoration stayed up a day past the official allowance. Residents loathed her methods, but generally found it easier to comply than to confront her. Despite her name, Marilyn, nearly everyone used the label Karen behind her back, mocking her constant demands to speak to the manager of any situation. She prided herself on ensuring Maplewood Glade remained tidy, orderly, and, as she put it, up to code. Little did anyone suspect, though, that Marilyn's tyranny would soon escalate from petty policing to downright maliciousness. And at the receiving end stood a gentle soul named Walter Bird, an elderly widower living on a quiet cul-de-sac at the neighborhood's edge. Walter Bird was 76 and had lived in Maplewood Glade for nearly 20 years. A retired accountant, he was known to be polite, mild-mannered, and unfailingly kind to anyone he met. When his wife passed away a few years back, Walter's health began to decline. He developed chronic respiratory issues and mild arthritis that slowed him down significantly. Walter kept mostly to himself. Without close family nearby, he shuffled around in a cozy routine, feeding the birds at dawn, reading the newspaper on his porch, and taking an afternoon walk with a cane. The neighbors who knew him understood that he was frail. He occasionally forgot to retrieve his mail right away or missed the HOA's ever-shifting instructions on how to place bins at the curb. Most people let these small infractions slide. He was, after all, everyone's kindly grandfather figure. But to Marilyn Farnett, Karen, none of that mattered. She believed Maplewood Glade should adhere to standards without exception. If Walter's porch looked slightly cluttered with magazines, or if a single twig remained on his driveway after a windy day, she frowned in disapproval, and she found her next project in policing him. At first, Marilyn bombarded Walter with polite-seeming HOA notices, letters reminding him to keep clear sight lines or to maintain optimal cleanliness in visible areas. He tried to comply, but his limited mobility made it challenging to keep everything pristine. One day, he forgot to wheel out his trash bin at the proper hour. The next, he placed a recycling bag near his front steps, planning to take it out later. And every time, Marilyn found fresh cause to scold him. One humid morning in late spring, Walter stepped onto his porch for his daily paper. He found, to his astonishment, 2 black garbage bags piled against his door. He blinked, confused. They weren't his. The bags reeked of rotting food, plastic wrappers, and unidentifiable scraps. Someone had deliberately dumped refuse at his entrance. He glanced around the cul-de-sac. No neighbors were in sight. He mustered the strength to drag the bags a few feet away. As he did, a voice startled him. "Mr. Bird, you can't leave trash strewn about. It's unsightly." Walter turned to see Marilyn Farnett. She stood on the sidewalk, arms folded, wearing her typical crisp blouse and neatly pressed slacks. Her expression was a mixture of mock concern and smugness. "Mom, I didn't put these here," Walter gasped, trying to catch his breath. "They appeared overnight." Marilyn sniffed dismissively. "Perhaps if you kept a neater exterior, no one would confuse your property as a dumping ground. We've had repeated issues with you leaving waste out of schedule, or letting newspapers accumulate. This is what happens when standards slip. With that, she turned on her heel and stalked away, leaving Walter reeling. He couldn't fathom who would do such a thing. Perhaps teenagers playing a prank? But the way Marilyn made her remarks suggested she was behind it, or at least she condoned it. Hurt and embarrassed, Walter tried to tidy up. He ended up wheezing from the exertion, requiring several breaks just to manage the heavy bags. That day marked a grim turning point for him. Instead of the usual friendly waves from neighbors, he felt a creeping sense of shame. He wondered if others blamed him for the unsightly trash. Little did he know this was only the start of Marilyn's twisted campaign. 2 mornings later, the scenario repeated. More garbage bags, again piled at Walter's door before sunrise. This time, the stench was more rancid, as if someone had selected particularly revolting refuse. Walter's heart sank. He heaved the bags into his bin as best he could, his back flaring with pain from strain. Soon afterward, Marilyn arrived in her silver sedan to begin her daily inspection drive around Maplewood Glade. She slowed as she passed Walter's house, rolling down the window. "I see you're still dealing with that trash," she called out with exaggerated innocence. "Maybe if you had a tidier porch, people wouldn't dump junk here." Walter exhaled shakily. "I'm trying my best," he said. "I'll talk to the HOA board about installing a camera or something." A strange light flickered in Marilyn's eyes at the mention of cameras. "Surveillance requires board approval," she said quickly. "We can't have residents putting up random devices and infringing on neighbor privacy. Best let the HOA handle it." She drove off, leaving Walter in a swirl of confusion and anger. Over the following days, as the pattern of trash dumping continued, he attempted to contact the HOA to file a complaint. Yet his calls seemed to go unanswered. Emails got short, automated replies. The HOA phone line connected him only to cryptic messages about office hours. It was as if Marilyn blocked every avenue to keep him from lodging a formal protest. The humiliation grew. Each morning, neighbors saw garbage on Walter's porch, many assuming it must somehow be his fault. A few sympathetic souls, like a young woman named Lily Tran, noticed the discrepancy. Walter wasn't the sort to generate that much refuse, and the situation didn't smell right. But most turned a blind eye, not wanting to cross the HOA's iron lady. While Marilyn tried to frame Walter as a messy resident inviting random trash, a handful of neighbors quietly grew suspicious. Among them was Lily Tran, who lived across the street. In her late 20s, Lily worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. She often saw Marilyn's early morning patrols. One dawn, Lily woke early for a project deadline and glanced out the window. Her eyes widened. She spotted Marilyn herself, stepping out of her sedan with 2 bulging trash bags, depositing them by Walter's porch, then hurrying away. Lily gasped, fumbling for her phone. She managed to snap a single, blurry photo through the blinds. It wasn't the clearest image, but the figure, silhouette, and posture were undeniably Marilyn Farnett. For a moment, Lily was so shocked she couldn't move. Then adrenaline kicked in. She had to let Walter know. But confronting Marilyn directly was risky. Lily had heard stories of neighbors receiving fines for arbitrary reasons once they fell on Marilyn's bad side. So Lily decided to talk discreetly to Walter first. That afternoon, she approached his porch, tiptoeing around a fresh pile of trash. "Mr. Bird?" she called softly. He opened the door, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Yes, I wanted to tell you something," Lily stammered, glancing around to ensure no eavesdroppers. "I have reason to believe it's Marilyn Farnett who's leaving these bags at your door." Walter looked stricken. "Good heavens. But why would she? I don't know. Maybe she's trying to paint you as a chronic violator. She's done some extreme things in the past, but this is a new low." Lily hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I snapped a photo, though it's not the best quality." Walter leaned on his cane, peering at the screen. Although the figure was grainy, the short hair, the shape, and the posture did resemble Marilyn. He felt a surge of both relief. He wasn't going insane, and dread. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. "I'll keep the evidence. Maybe I can show the board." Little did they know this small kernel of truth would soon ignite a wildfire among the residents, one that even Marilyn Farnett couldn't smother. One might think that exposing Marilyn's actions would make her back off, but it only pushed her to escalate. The next morning, Lily woke to find an HOA warning notice taped to her door, citing her for excessive overnight lighting. Puzzled, Lily realized the notice referred to her small porch lamp, which was well within normal brightness. The timing was too coincidental. Lily's friend Damian Gilmore, a realtor who lived 2 houses down, also received a letter the same week, claiming his front flower bed was obstructing the walkway, even though it was neatly trimmed. Anyone who seemed friendly toward Walter suddenly found themselves on Marilyn's radar. But the biggest blow landed on Walter himself. The HOA sent him an official complaint stating that multiple trash infractions had been documented at his address, implying he might face a steep fine if he didn't rectify the situation. Furious, Walter tried contacting the other HOA board members. Most were unreachable or sided with Marilyn, whose tight grip on the association stifled dissent. Karen had effectively orchestrated a smear campaign, painting Walter as an irresponsible homeowner who failed to keep his property in order. As the tension simmered, Lily confided in Damien and a few trusted neighbors, showing them the blurry photo of Marilyn lugging trash. They recognized the figure instantly. Outrage spread in hushed circles. Everyone knew Marilyn's cruelty was going too far, yet fear held them back from challenging her openly. She had the power to find them, bury them in bogus infractions, or even threaten legal battles under obscure HOA bylaws. But under the surface, alliances were forming. Lily, Damien, and a few others decided they needed a plan, something to protect Walter and to turn the tables on Marilyn Farnett once and for all. In the following weeks, Lily and Damien reached out to more neighbors, quietly sharing the evidence and explaining that Marilyn was behind the trash dumping at Walter's porch. They compiled statements from residents who had also endured minor or trumped-up infractions. As stories accumulated, it became clear that Karen had manipulated the HOA to do her bidding for far too long. Damien suggested a bold approach. If she wants to make trash the central issue, let's make it the central issue ourselves, but in a different way. Show the entire block what's actually happening. Lily nodded. We can't just hold a protest. She'll shut it down using the bylaws. Maybe we leverage this trash problem into something she can't legally oppose, like a community recycling event. People do those all the time. They hashed out a plan. Collect evidence. They'd gather more photos or, if possible, video of Marilyn dumping trash. Involve more neighbors. They needed enough households on their side, so Marilyn couldn't retaliate against everyone at once. Stage a recycling drive. If they organized a large-scale event that turned trash into a positive community endeavor, complete with official permits from the local municipality, Marilyn wouldn't have the authority to cancel it. Fundraiser angle. Lily proposed using any proceeds from recyclable materials to help pay Walter's mounting medical bills. He'd never asked for help himself, but the neighbors knew he had steep costs. Sitting in Lily's living room, a small group pored over the HOA bylaws, city regulations, and potential logistical hurdles. They named their operation Refuse Reversal, a wry nod to Marilyn's trash dumping. If she wanted to weaponize garbage, they'd transform it into something beneficial. Still, they had to keep it secret from Marilyn until the very last moment. If she caught wind of their plan, she might sabotage them. The conspirators texted each other privately, met at Lily's or Damien's house for hush-hush planning sessions, and wrote polite-sounding requests to the city for a recycling and community solidarity day. The city representative, hearing it was for a charitable cause, granted quick approval. All was set in motion. While the neighbors plotted their recycling event, Marilyn continued her attacks. She grew bolder, dumping not only household garbage, but occasionally lawn clippings or even leftover construction debris at Walter's porch. Each time, Walter had to struggle with the weight and stench, sometimes paying a local teen to help remove it. Emboldened by her sense of power, Marilyn began bragging at HOA meetings about her success in cleaning up the neighborhood. She cited Walter as a prime example of a resident who finally got the message. In reality, Walter was on the verge of despair. One evening, Lily and Damien visited Walter to inform him of their plan. He was astonished. "You're doing this to help me pay for my treatments?" he asked, voice quavering. "Partly that, yes," Lily replied softly, "but also to show her that we won't stand for bullying. Once we hold the event, the entire city will see that trash has become a symbol of your plight. We'll raise money, we'll recycle, and we'll expose what's really going on." Tears welled in Walter's eyes. "I never wanted to cause trouble," he murmured. "I just want to live peacefully." Damien squeezed his shoulder. "Sometimes it takes a little trouble to stop a bigger one." They set the date, a weekend 2 weeks away. The official local permit arrived in Lily's mailbox, complete with permission to block off part of the cul-de-sac for a refuse reversal recycling drive. Volunteers from a nearby environmental club agreed to help manage sorting stations. Lily quietly printed flyers to slip into mailboxes without giving one to Marilyn Farnett. Days passed, tension thick as a thundercloud. At dawn, Lily set up a discreet camera across from Walter's house, capturing Marilyn's daily trash dump in sharper clarity. They compiled the footage, ready to release it when the time was right. The night before the big recycling event, the neighbors quietly taped flyers onto each participating house's front door. The flyer read, "Refuse Reversal, a community recycling drive. Join us this Saturday on Pinecrest Cul-de-sac, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Bring recyclable materials, plastic, paper, metal, to designated stations. All proceeds from redeemed recyclables will support Walter Bird's medical bills. Let's turn trash into something positive for Maplewood Glade." In bold letters, they urged neighbors to watch a short, password-protected video link online. That link contained the compiled footage and photos of Marilyn's trash dumping, along with a short explanation of her harassment of Walter. The neighbors who watched were incensed. In text messages and phone calls, they expressed fury at how Karen had manipulated the situation. Marilyn, however, remained blissfully unaware. She had no idea about the upcoming drive, having received no flyer. After all, she rarely mingled with neighbors who might alert her to the plan. She believed she still had the upper hand, continuing to brag about her crackdown on Walter. But the stage was set. The next morning, volunteers would arrive early, block off part of the street with official city signs, and set up recycling tents, collection bins, and even a small donation table. The local news channel, tipped off by Damien, expressed interest in covering a heartwarming community recycling fundraiser. The train was in motion, unstoppable. At 7 a.m. on Saturday, residents from all over Maplewood Glade descended on the Pinecrest cul-de-sac with bags, boxes, and bins full of recyclables. The city's official permit allowed them to close the block for a day-long event. Volunteers wore matching green T-shirts bearing the slogan, "Refuse Reversal." They arranged sorting stations labeled paper, plastic, metal, and glass. A festive energy filled the air as people set up a small table with coffee, donuts, and a donation jar for Walter's medical fund. Walter arrived in a golf cart driven by Lily. He was taken aback by the scale of the operation. Neighbors greeted him with applause and kind words. Some carried signs that read, "Stand with Walter, no more trash attacks." The old man's eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude. Never had he imagined such a groundswell of support. Damien oversaw a makeshift stage area where a microphone stood. At 9 a.m. sharp, the local news van rolled in. A young reporter hopped out, scanning the lively scene with curiosity. She interviewed Lily about the event's purpose. Lily succinctly explained, "We're recycling to keep our neighborhood green, but we're also raising money for a longtime resident who's been unfairly targeted. We want to show that trash can be turned into something good." Meanwhile, the large donation jar rapidly filled with cash, checks, and even a few envelopes stuffed with gift cards. Some donors insisted on anonymity, but everyone seemed eager to help the gentle widower who'd borne the brunt of Marilyn's malice. Throughout the morning, volunteers sorted mountains of aluminum cans, plastic jugs, and newspapers. Each bag brought a small redemption value from a local recycling center. But collectively it was adding up. Lily's phone chimed periodically with messages from neighbors who couldn't attend but wanted to donate electronically. The event was a resounding success. Only one person still hadn't appeared, Marilyn Farnett. At around 11 a.m., a silver sedan screeched around the corner, pulling abruptly to a stop at the barricade that blocked off Pinecrest cul-de-sac. Out stepped Marilyn Farnett, hair pinned back in its usual stiff style, her expression thunderous. She marched toward the crowd. "What is this?" she demanded, voice trembling with fury. "Who authorized blocking off this street?" Damien calmly handed her a copy of the city permit. "We got permission, Karen. It's a recycling drive. I'm sure you'd approve. Keeping the neighborhood clean, right?" Marilyn's eyes darted around, taking in the dozens of neighbors, the news camera, the sorting stations, and the large banner reading "Refuse Reversal," benefiting Walter Bird. She noticed the donation jar, brimming with contributions. For a moment, she was speechless, clearly grasping that this event directly contradicted her narrative of Walter as a trashy nuisance. Finally, she snapped. "This is an unsanctioned HOA event. You can't do this without the board's explicit approval. I'm the HOA coordinator for Maplewood Glade, and I demand you shut this down." Lily stepped forward. "This event isn't organized under the HOA. It's a private community function with official city clearance. You have no authority to cancel it, Marilyn." A hush fell as neighbors watched. The reporter's camera swung toward Marilyn, capturing her scowl. Sensing the public scrutiny, Marilyn lowered her voice to a hiss. "You've orchestrated this fiasco just to undermine me, haven't you? Exploiting poor Mr. Bird's condition as some sob story?" Damien's temper flared. "Undermine you? Let's talk about that." He signaled to Lily, who tapped on her phone. The large portable speaker near the stage crackled to life, playing a short slideshow of images on a projected screen, a screen Lily had set up for visual aids about recycling. Instead, the images were of Marilyn, captured at dawn, hauling and dumping bags of trash onto Walter's porch. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The news reporter widened her eyes. Marilyn's face drained of color. She sputtered, "That's out of context. I was helping him dispose of trash he left around." But the sequence was damningly clear. The timestamps displayed consecutive mornings. Another angle showed her scurrying back to her sedan. Lily had even added text. "This is how Maplewood Glades HOA Karen handles violations." Marilyn turned a deep shade of crimson. "You have no right." The reporter stepped forward, microphone aimed. "Ms. Farnett, can you explain why you were depositing trash at Mr. Bird's home? Neighbors claim you used it to justify fines against him. Is that true?" Caught in the glare of public revelation, Marilyn's composure cracked. She stammered something about community standards, but the images were undeniable. Murmurs from the crowd grew louder, outraged. A few neighbors glared openly at the woman who'd tormented Walter for weeks. Realizing her attempted denial was futile, Marilyn turned on Walter. This man was letting trash accumulate. I had to do something. He refused to maintain the property properly. Walter, trembling slightly, stepped up to the microphone. The hush was palpable. "I've tried my best, Miss Farnett, but you took it upon yourself to dump garbage and blame me. I never wanted trouble. I only wanted a peaceful home." Tears glinted in his eyes. A few neighbors came forward, patting his shoulder. The crowd erupted in supportive applause. One by one, people shouted condemnation of Marilyn's behavior. Lily took the mic next, addressing the throng. "We wanted to show that the mess she created could be turned into something positive. Look around you. This recycling drive has raised hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars for Walter's bills. We used every tactic in Karen's playbook, except we used it for good, not harm." At that, a small cheer rose. Even the reporter seemed moved, capturing the emotional high point for her segment. Marilyn's rage burned behind her eyes. She scanned the faces arrayed against her. For years, she had wielded fear to maintain control. Now, her authority evaporated under the glare of truth and community unity. With a final, strangled gasp of frustration, she spun on her heel and stomped back to her sedan. The watchers parted to let her pass, the tension thick enough to slice. She slammed the door and roared away, leaving behind the echo of her failure. In the days that followed, the local news ran a short segment on the Refuse Reversal event. They highlighted Maplewood Glade's creative recycling drive, praising how neighbors rallied to help an elderly resident allegedly harassed by his own HOA official. A brief clip showed Maryland's frantic attempt to deny wrongdoing, overshadowed by footage of triumphant volunteers sorting piles of recyclable materials. Public sympathy flooded in for Walter Bird, and donations continued to arrive. The HOA board, blindsided by the negative publicity, scrambled to distance themselves from Marilyn Farnett's actions. At a hastily called meeting, they suspended her from any leadership roles, pending an investigation into misconduct. A few board members who had once rubber-stamped her decisions now claimed ignorance. Residents demanded more transparency and a fair set of policies that couldn't be twisted for personal vendettas. As for Marilyn, her nickname, Karen, now public knowledge, she found her power base crumbling. Neighbors she had once intimidated no longer feared her. People openly discussed the wrongdoing she'd committed. Rumors swirled that she might move away to avoid the shame, though no for sale sign appeared yet. Walter, meanwhile, experienced an outpouring of kindness. Lily organized a schedule so volunteers could assist him with chores, yard work, and any tasks that strained his health. Damien helped set up an online fundraiser for Walter's medical bills, boosted by the media attention. Within a week, they raised enough to cover several months of medication and therapy costs. On a clear afternoon, Walter shuffled onto his porch, gazing at the tidy steps that no longer bore piles of trash. The relief was palpable. A few neighbors across the way waved cheerfully. He waved back, feeling a renewed sense of belonging. The shame that had weighed on him lifted, replaced by gratitude for a community that proved not everyone was like Marilyn Farnett. Though Marilyn's defeat was public and humiliating, she remained in Maplewood Glade, barricading herself in her pristine house. Occasionally, neighbors glimpsed her peering through the curtains. She made no moves to apologize or retract her earlier statements. One morning, Lily was watering her front garden when she saw Marilyn's sedan roll by slowly. Their eyes met. Lily expected a glare, but instead, Marilyn's expression was hollow, almost resigned. She drove off without a word. Despite the shame, some thought Marilyn might lash out in smaller ways, filing petty complaints, distributing letters stuffed with obscure HOA rules. But the board, under intense pressure, curtailed her official powers. If she tried levying fines or writing new regulations, the board members demanded evidence or insisted on a vote. In effect, her reign of tyranny ended. Meanwhile, the recycling drive spurred fresh enthusiasm for communal events. Buoyed by the success, Lily and Damien proposed more positive neighborhood activities. A street-side potluck, a monthly farmer's market, even a donation bin for local charities. Residents realized that unity and transparency could make Maplewood Glade a genuinely supportive place to live, something Maryland's approach had stifled for too long. Walter remained the unofficial face of this new spirit. People often asked how he felt being the catalyst for so much change. He typically smiled shyly, replying, "I'm just grateful for all the help." Quietly, he credited Lily, Damien, and the entire block for turning a nightmare into a blessing. Summer arrived in Maplewood Glade, bringing bright sunshine and a sense of renewal. Where once neighbors tiptoed under the watchful eye of Karen, they now walked with heads high, confident in their shared camaraderie. One Saturday, the community held a celebratory barbecue. Rows of folding tables lined the cul-de-sac, stacked with potluck dishes. Walter was the guest of honor. He arrived, leaning on his cane, and found a seat among friends old and new. Over grilled burgers and fresh lemonade, people chatted about the next steps for the HOA. Some wanted to rewrite the bylaws to include protective clauses against harassment. Others simply enjoyed the fact that conversation was possible without the looming threat of fines. As evening shadows lengthened, Lily tapped the microphone to address the gathering. "We wanted to present something to Mr. Bird," she said. Damien appeared at her side, holding a framed certificate that read, in grateful recognition of Walter Bird for demonstrating the power of compassion over cruelty and inspiring Maplewood Glade to unite in a time of adversity. Applause rang out. Walter's eyes glistened with tears as he accepted the token. He tried to speak, but was overcome by emotion. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, celebrating not only him, but the spirit of resilience and unity that had blossomed in the wake of Marilyn Farnett's malice. Off to one side, behind her curtained window, Marilyn might have watched. She had been the orchestrator of the entire fiasco, intending to humiliate Walter into compliance. Instead, the neighborhood had rallied around him, exposing her and creating a positive event that helped with his medical bills and bonded the community. As dusk fell and fairy lights illuminated the tables, the barbecue continued with laughter and music. People danced, children played tag, and for the first time in years, Maplewood Glade felt truly free from oppressive rule. Walter, sitting under a tree with Lily and Damien, quietly marveled at the transformation. Trash had been turned into treasure, figuratively, financially, and spiritually. No one knew if Marilyn Farnett would move away or remain in silent disgrace. But the legacy of her cruelty had been reversed, reclaimed, and redeemed by neighbors who refused to let her bullying define their community. The final takeaway: even the foulest refuse can be repurposed into something that nurtures hope if people come together with a shared sense of justice and compassion.